While most of the East Coast was still hitting the snooze button, the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals wasn't just awake, they were busy dismantling the entire legal foundation of Donald Trump's defense. At exactly 6:47 a.m., a notification hit the docket that should terrify every single person inside Mar-a-Lago. This wasn't a standard ruling, this was a judicial drone strike. Let's look at the timeline, because the timeline tells you the story the mainstream media is missing. Trump's lawyers filed a desperate emergency application at 11 p.m. the night before. They were trying to buy time, they were trying to jam the gears. But less than 8 hours later, before the court clerk's office was even officially open for coffee, the judges responded. They didn't schedule oral arguments, they didn't ask for a briefing schedule, they didn't engage in the polite back and forth that usually defines high-stakes appellate law. They just said no. And they did it in the most insulting way possible for a man who obsesses over his own brand. The ruling was issued per curiam. Now, if you didn't go to law school, you might gloss over that Latin phrase, don't. It's crucial. Per curiam means by the court. It means the opinion wasn't authored by one specific judge. It means all three judges, including a Republican appointee, spoke with one singular, indistinguishable voice. There was no dissent. There was no concurring opinion offering a slightly different take. It is a monolithic wall of rejection. They stripped him of the dignity of a divided court. They denied him the ability to attack a specific liberal judge because they didn't put a single name on the opinion. It is a unanimous smackdown. But the real dagger was in the language itself. For years, Trump has operated under the assumption that the presidency is a cloak of invincibility that you get to wear for life. The court didn't just remove that cloak, they burned it. Listen to this line from the ruling. I want you to really hear it. For the purpose of this criminal case, President Donald Trump has become Citizen Trump, with all of the defenses of any other criminal defendant. Citizen Trump? Not President Trump. Not the former executive. Citizen. In 2 words, they reduced the most powerful man in the Republican Party to the same legal status as a guy getting booked for a DUI in downtown DC. They explicitly stated that the office of the presidency does not place its former occupants above the law. They wrote that executive immunity acts to protect the office, not to shield the occupant from the consequences of criminal behavior after they leave. The judges essentially looked at Trump's argument that a president can order SEAL Team 6 to assassinate a political rival and be immune from prosecution unless impeached by the Senate, and called it what it is. A recipe for dictatorship. They wrote that such a stance would collapse our system of separated powers. This is the legal equivalent of a total knockout. Usually, courts leave a little wiggle room. They leave a ladder for the losing side to climb down. Not here. The DC Circuit cut the ladder, poured gasoline on it, and lit a match. Why does this matter right now? Because it resets the clock. By issuing this ruling so quickly and so decisively, the court is signaling that they are done playing Trump's delay games. They know exactly what he's doing. They know the strategy is delay until Inauguration Day 2025. And by responding in hours, not weeks, they are telling Jack Smith, go ahead, the light is green. But here is the billion-dollar question that nobody is answering correctly. Trump has appointed 3 Supreme Court justices. He reshaped the federal judiciary for 4 years specifically for a moment like this. He built a firewall of conservative jurisprudence. So where are they? Why did the Supreme Court sit silently while the D.C. Circuit obliterated their guy at 6-0 inches the morning? Why hasn't Clarence Thomas issued an emergency stay? Why is Samuel Alito quiet? The silence coming from the Supreme Court isn't negligence, it's a strategy. And if you think the conservative justices are coming to save Donald Trump, you are misreading the brutal game of power being played in Washington right now. There is a myth that MAGA supporters tell themselves at night to sleep better. It goes like this. Trump appointed Gorsuch, Kavanaugh, and Barrett. They owe him. When the chips are down, they will step in and protect the boss. That is a fundamental misunderstanding of how the conservative legal movement works. The Supreme Court is not a loyalty program. It is a transactional machine. And here is the brutal truth that Donald Trump is just now realizing. Asterisk, asterisk. The transaction is complete. Asterisk, asterisk. Think about it. Why did the Federalist Society and the Republican establishment tolerate Trump for 4 years? Why did Mitch McConnell look the other way during the tweets, the chaos, the scandals? For one reason, to capture the judiciary, to secure a 6-3 conservative supermajority that would last for 30 years. They got it. They got Roe v. Wade overturned. They got the deregulation of the administrative state. They got affirmative action struck down. They got everything they wanted. So ask yourself, what value does Donald Trump offer the Supreme Court now? Nothing. In fact, he is a liability. Chief Justice John Roberts cares about one thing above all else: the legitimacy of the court. He knows that public trust in the Supreme Court is at historic lows. He knows that if the court is seen as nothing more than a partisan cleanup crew for a criminal defendant, the institution itself might not survive in its current form. If the Supreme Court were to intervene and say, yes, Donald Trump has absolute immunity to commit crimes while in office, they aren't just saving Trump, they are effectively ruling that Joe Biden and every future president is a king. They would be stripping the court of its own power to check the executive branch. Why would they vote to make themselves irrelevant? That is why you are hearing this deafening silence. The silence is the answer. By refusing to issue an emergency stay immediately, by letting the D.C. Circuit's unanimous ruling hang in the air, the Supreme Court is engaging in a pocket veto of Trump's political survival. They are letting the lower court do the dirty work. This is the Pontius Pilate strategy. They can wash their hands of it. They can say, hey, we didn't convict him. We just didn't see a constitutional reason to intervene in the lower court's brilliant analysis. It allows the conservative justices to keep their hands clean while the legal system takes out the trash for the Republican establishment. Think about the conversations happening in private rooms at the Army-Navy Club or the Capitol Hill Club. The old guard Republicans, the donors, the senators who smile at Trump but secretly despise him, they know they can't beat him in a primary. The base is too loyal. But a conviction creates a permission structure. It gives them an out. If Trump is convicted by a jury of his peers before November, the donor class can finally say, we love his policies, but we can't run a felon. We have to move on. The Supreme Court knows this. They are reading the same polls we are. They see the same danger. And right now, it looks like they are making a calculated decision to let the wheels of justice grind Donald Trump down. But there is a variable that the smart guys in robes can't control. They are dealing with a man who doesn't play by institutional rules. When the walls close in on a normal politician, they resign. They cut a deal. They fade away. When the walls close in on Donald Trump, he doesn't retreat. He detonates. We are already seeing the psychological fracture happening in real time. And if you want to know how dangerous the next 70 days are going to be, you don't need to look at the court dockets. You just need to look at his phone. To understand the danger of this moment, you have to stop looking at Donald Trump as a politician and start looking at him as a psychological case study. We are witnessing what psychologists call a narcissistic collapse. For 50 years, Trump has operated on a simple algorithm: attack, deny, countersue, claim victory. It worked in real estate, it worked in reality TV, it even worked in the White House. But the federal court system is the first opponent in his life that doesn't care about his reality distortion field. Judge Tanya Chutkan doesn't care about his poll numbers, the D.C. Circuit Court doesn't care about his rallies, and that loss of control is breaking him. Look at the feed. Really look at it. When the immunity ruling dropped, a disciplined politician would have issued a somber statement about fighting for the Constitution. Trump didn't do that. He unleashed a stream of consciousness that sounded less like a candidate and more like a hostage taker. He posted this: "If these witch hunts don't stop, our country will face problems the likes of which we've never seen." Read that again. That isn't a prediction. That is a threat. He is essentially telling the Department of Justice, nice country you have here, shame if something happened to it. This is the logic of an abuser. Look what you made me do. He is signaling to his most volatile supporters that violence is not just an option, but a necessity to save him. And here is the dark irony. Every time he hits post, he is tightening the noose around his own neck. Jack Smith isn't just watching these posts, he's archiving them. Every attack on a witness, every veiled threat against a judge, every claim that he is still the president, it's all evidence. It proves consciousness of guilt. Innocent people don't threaten to burn the country down if they have to go to trial. They ask for a court date to clear their names. Trump is doing the opposite because deep down, he knows the facts are damning. His legal team knows this. I guarantee you right now, there is a lawyer in Florida begging him to put the phone down. But he can't. He literally cannot stop himself. The dopamine hit of the likes, the validation from the base, it's the only thing soothing his anxiety. But the anxiety is about to get much, much worse. Because while Trump is fighting the ghost of the deep state on social media, a very real, very boring enemy is attacking his flank. Math. You can survive a political scandal. You can even survive a bad news cycle. But you cannot survive the logistics of a four-front war when your resources are bleeding out. The empire isn't just crumbling legally, it's crumbling financially. There is an old saying in the military, amateurs talk strategy, professionals talk logistics. Donald Trump is fighting a four-front legal war. Washington, D.C., Florida, Georgia, New York. Any one of these cases would bankrupt a normal multi-millionaire. Fighting all four simultaneously is a logistical impossibility, even for him. Let's look at the burn rate. In 2023 alone, Trump's political action committees spent over $50 million on legal fees. That is donor money. That is money that should be going to TV ads in Pennsylvania or ground game in Wisconsin. Instead, it is going into the pockets of criminal defense attorneys. But here is the problem. The well is running dry. There are FEC limits on how much donor money can be used for personal legal defense. And the lawyers, they aren't stupid. They see the writing on the wall. They are demanding huge retainers up front. Why? Because they know a guy famous for not paying his bills is about to have his assets frozen. He's bleeding cash at a rate that is unsustainable. But he's also bleeding an even more precious resource, time. This is where the math becomes brutal. Judge Chutkan has invoked the Speedy Trial Act. This isn't a suggestion, it's a federal statute. Once the appeals are exhausted and they are almost gone, the court has a mandate to bring this to trial within 70 days. Do the math with me. If the Supreme Court denies the stay in late February, the clock restarts. That puts the trial starting in May or June. That means Donald Trump will be sitting at a defendant's table in a federal courthouse in Washington, D.C., 6 hours a day, every day, right in the middle of the general election campaign. He won't be doing rallies. He won't be doing fundraisers. He will be listening to testimony. And who is testifying? This is the kill shot. The prosecution isn't going to call Rachel Maddow or AOC to the stand. They are going to call Mike Pence. They are going to call Mark Meadows. They are going to call Pat Cipollone. These aren't never Trumpers. These were his hand-picked loyalists, the men who were in the room. Mark Meadows, his chief of staff, has reportedly already testified to the grand jury under an immunity deal. Do you understand what that means? It means the person who knows where all the bodies are buried has already given the map to Jack Smith. In a RICO case like the one in Georgia, the first person to flip gets the best deal. The last person to flip gets prison. The race to betray Donald Trump started months ago. We are just now seeing the results. Trump is isolated. He is broke, relatively speaking, and he is surrounded by former friends who are trying to stay out of jail. So, what is his only way out? What is the only card left in the deck? He has to win. He doesn't just want to be president again. He needs to be president to survive. The Oval Office is no longer a goal. It is a sanctuary. It is the only place on Earth where the handcuffs can't reach him. And that brings us to the terrifying endgame. Because if the legal system does its job, and he is convicted before November, what happens to the millions of people who believe he is their savior? So, where does this road end? Let's play out the scenario that keeps Reince Priebus and Mitch McConnell awake at night. Imagine it is July, the Republican National Convention in Milwaukee, the balloons drop, the confetti falls, and the nominee of the Party of Lincoln accepts the nomination, pending a sentencing hearing in the District of Columbia. This is the moral event horizon for the GOP. We already have the data. A recent poll showed that 32% of Republican primary voters, almost one-third, said they would not support Trump if he is convicted of a crime. In a general election that will be decided by 40,000 votes in 3 swing states, losing 32% of your own base is a death sentence. It is an electoral landslide waiting to happen. The Republican establishment knows this. They know a convicted felon drags down every House race, every Senate seat, every governorship. They know it turns the entire party radioactive for suburban women and independent voters. But they are trapped in a prison of their own making. They cannot dump him because the MAGA base, the diehards, will burn the party to the ground if they do. And they cannot win with him because the moderates will stay home. The fracture is already visible. You have Nikki Haley staying in the race not because she thinks she can win delegates, but because she is betting on the chaos option. She is positioning herself as the break glass in case of emergency candidate when the conviction drops. And make no mistake, the conviction is the likely outcome. We aren't talking about a he said, she said case. We are talking about recorded phone calls, National Archives receipts, and verified text messages. The evidence is overwhelming. So the next 28 days are the most critical period in modern political history. If the Supreme Court steps aside, the trial proceeds. The facts come out, the myth of invincibility shatters. But if the Supreme Court intervenes, if they delay this past November, they aren't just delaying a trial, they are effectively deciding the election. They are denying the American people the right to know if their potential president is a criminal before they cast their vote. That is the stakes. It is no longer Democrat versus Republican. It is the rule of law versus the cult of personality. We are watching a stress test of the American experiment. Can a system designed in the 18th century handle a 21st century authoritarian who refuses to accept reality? The DC Circuit just said yes. Jack Smith is betting yes. Now, we wait to see if the Supreme Court agrees. But ultimately, the final jury isn't in Washington. It's you. This legal warfare is complex, it's fast, and the mainstream media is terrified to tell you the raw truth because they are afraid of losing access. We aren't. If you want to stay ahead of the spin, if you want to know what the docket actually says, not what the pundits wish it said, you need to be subscribed to this channel. Hit that subscribe button, turn on the bell, because when that next ruling drops, we will be live to break it down. And I want to hear from you in the comments right now. This is the question of the year. Will Donald Trump be a convicted felon by Election Day? Yes or no? Leave your prediction below. I'll see you in the next breakdown.